Well, the number of shooting incidents in the U.S. in which toddlers have either shot themselves or someone else has increased by almost a third this year, up from last year. The Washington Post is reporting this trend. Now, these numbers, they're 23 since the start of the year. And I just want to go over some of these cases with you, Elliot, because they're really heartbreaking and disgusting to realize what's going on in this country. For example, April the 20th, not too long ago, a 2-year-old boy in Indiana found the gun of his mother that she left in her purse on the kitchen counter, fatally shot himself. The very next day, April the 21st, in this country, in Missouri, Kansas City, a 1-year-old girl shot and killed herself with her father's gun while he was sleeping. The list goes on and on. On the 22nd, the next day, a 3-year-old, 26th, a 3-year-old, 27th, a 3-year-old, 29th of April, another 3-year-old. So we're seeing these cases where a baby still in a diaper is able to get a hold of a gun and shoot themselves at a very alarming rate in this country. We're talking about 23 cases, and it's the beginning of May in 2016. Right. You and I talk about gun violence really frequently, and there are cases like the one that you're going to talk about, presumably of the 11-year-old boy who was able to get his hands on a gun and shoot an intruder. But there are other cases like this where we're seeing children that aren't old enough to read or write or speak in some cases are getting a hold of weapons.
Yeah, and I think part of the argument that is run by the NRA and by the gun advocates is the fact that the babies or toddlers simply don't have the strength to the fine motor skills required to be able to pull a trigger. Well, clearly these instances indicate that that's not the case, and that they're on the rise. And all too often, these sort of statistics are swept under the carpet. So it's great that you're able to pull these out. The other thing that the NRA always often or frequently argue is, well, a toddler's much more likely, statistically much more likely to die from choking in the home than they are from shooting themselves in the home. And that's just a fallacious argument as far as I'm concerned, because for a number of reasons. Number one is that thankfully there aren't as many instances of choking as there are in terms of just physically having guns in properties. Eating is something that obviously is a daily occurrence. Hopefully getting your hands on a gun is not a daily occurrence. And the fact that they would even begin to run that argument as a counter to, oh, well, there's an acceptable level at which guns are going to be, you're going to be involved in violence if you have a gun, again, it just seems to be counterintuitive to me. This is a particularly or uniquely American phenomenon. The fact that I think the statistics are something like 1.7 million children live in a house where they can get access to a gun, meaning there's a gun, it's loaded, and it's in the vicinity and accessible to children, means that children are 16 times more likely than any other country to suffer gun violence, either self-inflicted or to commit gun violence on somebody else, a member of a family or a friend in the house.
Christopher Ingram, who's a Washington Post reporter who put this story together, it's being aggregated and cited globally. Now we're talking about it because of the fabulous work that he did in putting these cases together. But for me, just taking this back to responsible gun owners, I don't want to indict the entire population. I really want to indict these irresponsible, idiotic parents who would leave a gun and a purse on a table when you have a toddler. And for me, reading some of these cases, and I encourage you to find Christopher's piece and really go through it in its entirety, because some of these cases are unbelievable. Speaking of this reporter, I just want to take you to something that he said. Since April the 20th, there have been at least 7 instances in which 1-, 2-, or 3-year-old shot themselves or somebody else in the United States. And he simply puts that, we've been talking about it now for three minutes or so, summing it up, we're talking about babies here, shooting themselves in this country, and the aspect of being, if you're going to have a gun in your home, not even having the wherewithal to put it under a lock if you have a small child is well beyond my rationale. I can't wrap my head around it, Elliot.
Sure. I mean, last year there were 265, so in 2015 there were 265 instances of children being involved in gun violence. And the indication is 83 of those were fatal, 41 of those were self-inflicted. Right. The balance were when they shot somebody else by mistake. The indication is that number's only going to increase this year from the statistics you've quoted.
It's an alarming trend. These numbers are up by a third since last year, which means that More toddlers in this country are able to access a gun. Georgia, of course, had the highest number of toddler shootings. They have some of the most lax gun laws in the country, with 8 of these instances happening since January of last year. Texas and Missouri are behind them, tied for second, with 7 shootings each, and then Florida and Michigan round out the top states in this country that have the most gun instances, fatalities regarding babies. Now, just to take you to some other brief numbers really quickly, 77 instances last year alone in which children younger than 18 accidentally shot someone. So in this specific case, we're only talking about fatalities, but there are a greater number out there where it doesn't end in a fatality, but we're still talking about children getting their hands on a gun.